Everyone, how are you? I hope I am live. Let me just check. I hope I am audible as well. Hello, everyone. How are you? Yes, perfect. So we are live. Welcome, everyone, to the analysis of Symbiosis Entrance Test 2024. I will be taking you all through my analysis, my experience of the exam which I took today in the 11:30 to 12:30 slot. Uh, so let's get on with it. First things first, the first impressions from whatever I've heard. What I'll be covering is I'll be taking you all through the interface. I'll be taking you all through what was the overall feeling of the paper. Then we'll move on to each and every section individually. I'll cover the type of questions, the variety, the difficulty level, what is the score that is expected, and then my overall analysis as to what should be the cutoff, what should be the score that you should be ideally looking at. So starting with this, let's first look at the SET test structure. So the structure was standard as we had discussed in the pre-exam sessions as well, which is that there were 60 questions to be solved in 1 hour, 16 questions under general English, 16 under quantitative, 16 under general awareness, and 12 questions from analytical and logical reasoning. To solve these 60 questions, you had a total of 60 minutes of time, and the marking scheme was again as predicted, one question for every correct answer, and there was no negative marking, which means you had to or you were expected to attempt all the 60 questions. Now, just a general thing before I move on. If there's any doubt, if there are any questions that you all have, make sure that you all put that in the chat right away so that by the time I end my analysis, I'll have all the questions and then I'll take up all the questions that you would have put up as well. Now, moving ahead, important things about the test that you should kind of have an idea about. The first is that the user face was pretty friendly. It is similar to what we had used in our mocks as well. It was easily navigatable. You did not really have any issues. The font and everything was pretty clear and there was no problem. Second is there were 4 different sections, again, as mentioned in the previous slide, which was quant, verbal, logical reasoning, and GK. And you could switch between sections. You could jump from one section to the other. There was no restriction on that. Next is there was no sectional limit as expected, and there was no screen calculator, again, as it has been the norm in the previous exams as well. Now, moving on from this, let's get to the analysis of the first section, which is general English. Now, here are the topics, here are the types of questions that were covered in this particular session, in this particular attempt. So there were a total of 16 questions, which were divided as follows. There were 2 questions under tenses. Now, the 2 questions that were there, one was where you had to convert a particular question into the past tense. One was a question where a sentence was given and you had to identify the tense. Again, pretty direct, pretty standard stuff. There were 2 or 3 questions on proverbs and idioms. There was one which was with respect to figures of speech, which was about, if I remember correctly, it was about understanding the Raghuram Rajan's philosophy of something. So that was the question on figure of speech. Again, fairly doable. Grammar, there were around 4 or 5 questions across different categories, and then there were questions on vocabulary and spellings. So there were a couple of questions where you had to identify the correct spelling, and everything was pretty standard stuff. What I figured out was that just to confuse the students, what they had done was they had given multiple questions, they had given an option which was none of the above, which usually wasn't really the case. So that just brought in a certain level of confusion in the minds of the students. Could have brought in, but if you knew your answers, it was pretty standard stuff. So overall analysis, what I would say is if you were a person who likes verbal, who's good at verbal, you could have easily gone on to score around 14. Overall difficulty was moderate just because of the language, the word. So there was a word copious. If you did not know what it means, you wouldn't have been able to decipher it, and so on. So there were certain words, there were some questions which were kind of left field, which again, pata hoga to pata hoga, nahi pata hai to kuch nahi ho payega. So overall moderate, a good attempt would have been around 12, and you could have gotten 12 marks even if you were not really the best at general English. But yes, if it was a strength, you could have scored around 13 to 14 easily. So ideal time 10 to 12 minutes, because nothing out of the blue. There was no poem like last year. Last year there were questions on poems or RCs, etc. This time there was nothing. There was just one lengthy question or one long question, which was kind of around the on the lines of RCs, but it was like there's a paragraph and then you had to just identify what would it kind of hint towards, or what was the summary of that. But again, that could have been done, wasn't really difficult, standard straight stuff. Next, let's come to quantitative. Now, quantitative is the first section where I felt कि there was something different. And remember, हम लोग बार बार बोल रहे थे that you should be very good at arithmetic. Well, this is the reason. Out of the total 16 questions that we had for quantitative aptitude, 7 of them were from arithmetic. If I give you the further breakup for arithmetic, there were questions, around 2 questions from time and work. There were 2 questions on percentage change, etc. There was a question on profit and loss. And again, all the questions were direct questions. There wasn't a question where you had to kind of like think, कि यार ये क्या होगा? You could have done questions basis ratio proportions also. So doable questions, manageable questions, I would say in our particular IMS lingo, I would say these were type A questions. There was only one question on modern math, which again was easy if you knew the property groups to the power of objects. कि 6 दोस्त थे, उनको इनविटेशन कार्ड्स भेजने हैं, 4 लोगों को काम दिया होगा, pretty standard stuff, कर सकते थे, wasn't really difficult. 2 questions on geometry, more so I would say visual questions, because you had to identify the fourth vertex of a parallelogram, keyword being parallelogram. And the second part, the second question that you had was a standard right angle triangle. तो coordinates दिए थे, triangle का perimeter निकालना था. Again, doable questions. Only one question on algebra, which was on the lines of making the equations, which was about the 124 वाला amount कि आपने 11 और 7 के आपके पास stamps या amounts है वगैरह. And that was doable. The surprise element for me was numbers. Numbers last year एक ही question था, but इस साल 3 questions थे. So there was a question on logarithm, there was a question on HCF LCM, and there was one more question around numbers only. So basically, pretty spread out, pretty evenly spread out part, and 2 questions on DI, which were the easiest questions. Like you couldn't go wrong in the 2 DI questions. I somehow feel that the quant was specifically kept easy so that students could kind of score. But this was also kind of, if I look at it from a coming section point of view, it was because कोई और section को उन्होंने difficult कर रखा था. So my analysis is easy to moderate, and a genuine good attempt is 14 plus. बिकॉज रियलिस्टिकली अगर यहाँ पे देना है तो अरिथमेटिक के 7 में से 7 आप कर सकते थे, मे बी एक क्वेश्चन यहाँ वहां तो वहां का ही घटाओ. मॉडर्न मैथ फेयरली डुएबल, इजी क्वेश्चन. ज्योमेट्री डेफिनेटली करना था. एल्जेब्रा में अगर आप इक्वेशन लिखने में थोड़ा गड़बड़ करोगे तो शायद प्रॉब्लम आ सकता है. यू हैड टू यूज द ऑड इवन फंडा देयर कि ऑड ही होने चाहिए, इवन ही होने चाहिए. एंड नंबर्स क्वेश्चंस वर आल्सो फेयरली डायरेक्ट. सो डीआई भी इजी था. सो वन क्वेश्चन फ्रॉम मे बी अरिथमेटिक जो आइडियली नहीं छूटना चाहिए, and maybe the algebra question or the logarithm question depending on what you've left as options. बाकी सब कुछ easy था, and ideal time 20 to 25 minutes if you do not want to make mistakes. But ये 25 आप दे सकते हो because बाकी जगहों पे आप उतना टाइम नहीं दे रहे हो. डुएबल था, प्रॉब्लम नहीं आना चाहिए. सो इट्स अ सिंपल ट्रेड ऑफ. अगर आपका वर्बल बेटर है तो आपका क्वांट शायद उतना अच्छा नहीं होगा, तो आप वहां पे 14 और यहाँ पे 12 स्कोर कर लो. अगर क्वांट अच्छा है वो नहीं है तो यहाँ पे 14 वहां 12 स्कोर कर लो. You could have gotten around 26 questions from these 2 sections easily. Coming to, oh, I have to tell you, after I finished the exam, I came out and all I could hear people talking about, or people who came up to me and asked about the paper, everyone had just one general thing: GK कैसा था? And trust me, there were 16 questions, 16 of the, I would say, choicest questions जो वो लोग कहाँ कोने से ढूंढ कर लाए थे, I have no idea. The split was 11 questions on static GK, 5 on current affairs. 5 current affairs में से भी 2 questions were on the G20 summit. कि G20 summit में क्या क्या डिस्कस हुआ था, and G20 summit में कौन से कंट्री ने पार्ट लिया था. There were the 4 options. So accordingly, अब 2 क्वेश्चन अगर G20 के बारे में पढ़ा है या फिर बाकी चीज आपको पता है तो आप कर सकते थे. One thing that I felt odd was there was a question which was very specific to finance and accountancy कि ट्विन बैलेंस शीट क्या होता है. अब ये जीके में क्यों था, आई एम नॉट रियली श्योर, बट ठीक है, मे बी इट्स लाइक कि दे इंटेंशनली वांटेड टू कीप जीके डिफिकल्ट बिकॉज क्वांट एंड वर्बल और एलआर इजी था. बट ठीक है, द ट्रेड ऑफ वाज बिटवीन दिस. जीके वाज अ सेक्शन जहां पे आप बहुत ज्यादा टाइम देकर भी कुछ ज्यादा नहीं कर पाते. एंड आई फेल्ट दैट गिवन द पास्ट पेपर्स, गिवन द पास्ट ईयर्स का ट्रेंड, GK was slightly more difficult. There were 3 or 4 questions जो definitely हर एक को आने ही चाहिए थे. One question which we have covered in our IMS mocks as well, which was about the Asian Games happening, Winter Asian Games happening in India. The mascot was snow leopard. ये हमारे IMS के टेस्ट में भी है, तो ये आपको आना चाहिए था. But overall difficulty was difficult for GK, and according to me, I would say 6 to 7 was a good attempt. 6 to 7 correct answers is what I would be targeting कि हाँ अगर इतना आ गया तो I am safe. And the ideal time was 6 to 8 minutes. Again, जितना पढ़ने के लिए टाइम लगेगा उतना ही टाइम. But yes, this was a section which was difficult and maybe that is the reason कि quant या बाकी sections को थोड़ा easy करके थोड़ा tone down किया गया था. Coming to the last section, which is analytical and logical reasoning. Another straightforward section. दो question थे verbal reasoning के, which was again assumptions वाले and course of action वाले. 3 questions on coding decoding. Surprisingly, coding decoding का एक question, as in the series वाला एक question, was also asked in quant. So there was a question which was about the series जहाँ पे आपको बस 2 के पार्स 2, 4, 8, 16, 32 इस पावर्स में जाना था. But again, standard straightforward questions. 2 questions on clocks and calendars cumulatively because एक clocks पे था और एक calendars पे था. Again doable अगर आपको odd days का concept पता है. There were 2 questions which were ascending descending order. Now, what was this ascending descending order? This was something which was fairly new, which we did not really have in the past papers. So ascending descending order that they had given you 5 and you had to arrange these activities in the ascending descending order or rather the forward order or the backward order. तो एक account opening वाला था कि आप account कब open करोगे, documents देने हैं, पैसे डेबिट करने हैं, पैसे क्रेडिट करने हैं, account बंद करना है. So ये पूरा एक process था. That was one question. The other question was about the population, ecosystem, community, etc., etc. वो. So from a smaller level to a bigger level, or from a descending or ascending order, that was something which I felt new, was new, could go either ways, but again doable था. One question on series here as well, and blood relation का एक question था, which again, if you take it on the face value, was doable. People were debating कि sir father हो सकता है, uncle हो सकता है, but again it could go either here or there and doable questions, nothing really out of the blue, nothing really out of the expected. And there was one solitary question with respect to linear arrangements जिसमें the only confusing part were the names of the people, Naksh and Niket and Niketan and so on so on. But आप कर सकते हो, आपको सिर्फ उनको alternate up down arrangement में बिठाना था and you could have done it. My analysis was again, since GK was difficult, बाकी उस पे उन्होंने थोड़ा tone down किया था. Easy to moderate, you could have gotten 9 to 10 questions easy. The only things that you could have maybe made a problem or a mistake in could have been the verbal reasoning or the ascending descending. Everything else was easy, could have been done, nothing really out of the blue. And around 12 to 15 minutes दे दोगे तो भी आपका हो जाएगा. Ideally 12 minutes was also fine, but ठीक है, अगर हम लोग 10 to 15 minutes भी consider कर ले तो भी problem नहीं है. ओवरऑल एनालिसिस की अगर बात करें तो माय एनालिसिस ऑफ द ओवरऑल पेपर वाज इट वाज एन इजी टू मॉडरेट पेपर ओवरऑल बिकॉज आउट ऑफ द 4 सेक्शंस 3 सेक्शंस वर प्रीटी इजी जहां पे आप आराम से 35-36 स्कोर कर सकते हो एंड दैट विल इवेंचुअली विद द 5-6 मार्क्स टू स्कोर इन जीके कुड हैव टेकन यू अबव 41. Therefore, a good attempt is 44, but a good score is going to be 41 plus. So our my analysis, my expectation is कि around 40 to 41 का कट ऑफ जाना चाहिए. Could go higher again depending if people are good at verbal and quant and दोनों में 14 लेकर आ गए, LR में 10 आ गए और यहाँ पे 4-5 तो 42 43 में भी जा सकता है. But yeah, anything about 40, anything about 41 is going to be good enough. And the way forward right now is going to be that your ICT score is 50% and the PIVAT process is going to take up your 50% of the paper. One general suggestion, people who've given this, प्लीज मेक अ नोट कि भाई पेपर पैटर्न इज एवरीथिंग विच इज स्टैंडर्ड विच इज एक्सपेक्टेड. तो अटेम्प्ट 2 के लिए भी आप जब प्रिपेयर करोगे जस्ट गो इन विद द सेम माइंडसेट. डू नॉट गो विद द बायस की जीके डिफिकल्ट था तो वहां भी डिफिकल्ट होगा, जीके इजी आ सकता है, यू नेवर नो. But yes, the second attempt is on the 11th. I'll see you all again on the 11th for the second attempt ka analysis. And the results are expected to be out by the 22nd. So, yeah, let's see what happens with that. Now, I will just take up a few questions that we have. So, answer key nahi hai. The answer key is not really something that we make or we give out because it's something that the exam kind of keeps with them. The next is expected cutoff. So a lot of questions were on the lines of expected cutoff. My analysis, according to me, the expected cutoff should be anywhere around 41 के आसपास. 40-41 बोल दो या 41-42 डिपेंड्स बिकॉज लास्ट ईयर से थोड़ा कम होगा मुझे लग रहा है बिकॉज जीके डिफिकल्ट था. बट एज आई मेंशन, जीके डिफिकल्ट होने के बावजूद भी उन्होंने बाकी सेक्शंस को इजी किया था. सो ओवरऑल इट वाज somewhere you could have won in the test, somewhere you could have lost. But again, अगर आपने सही क्वेश्चंस को चूज किया है, shouldn't really be a problem. टिकट्स क्वेश्चन आई कौन सा बोल रहे हो आप, वो 11 and 7 वाला. 11 I see I'm not going to be discussing answers right now. The question was fairly easy. आपको बस इक्वेशन बनाना है और आपको ऑड इवन कहाँ पे बनेगा ये चेक करना है. Now you all can explore that. Algebra question. कौन सा algebra question? वही tickets वाला. See, do not ask specific questions. I am not going to be giving answers to specific questions. I'll tell approaches, but more or less it was about how was the overall paper. That is what is important. Uh, Again, a few more questions कि सर इसका आंसर क्या है उसका आंसर क्या है. ब्लड रिलेशन क्वेश्चन, एक्सपेक्टेड कट ऑफ, आंसर की हम लोग नहीं देंगे. बट यस, ओवरऑल इट वाज एन इजी पेपर. ऑल्सो 50 and 50 है, बट देन इफ यू गो टू द वेबसाइट देव ऑल्सो काइंड ऑफ मेंशन कि हम लोग 70-30 भी लेंगे. सो इट्स प्रोग्राम बाय प्रोग्राम. सो सम फॉर सम प्रोग्राम्स देव ऑल्सो मेंशन कि 70% होगा एसीटी के लिए and 30% होगा for the interviews. But this is what is standard stuff from the last years. This year it was varying. So when we had the form filling thing going on, that time they had given a 50-50 split, 50-15-35 split. But abhi on some of them it's also a 70-30 split. So that is something which हमको देखना पड़ेगा जब result आएगा, तो they'll announce that as well. One more question. How to prepare for the second attempt GK? So okay, GK के लिए what I'll suggest is एक अपना compendium जो है IMS का, which you'll get on our portal, वो compendium करो, because there were a few questions which were from the compendium, like were on the lines of that. So that could have maybe helped you with your ये. But overall, see what I felt is कि GK is very dicey. आपको नहीं पता है वो कहाँ से क्या पूछ लेंगे. So could go either ways. Yes, the cutoff that I mentioned is going to be for the BBA, SCMS BBA ka cutoff. So it's going to be for that. But again, that is subjective, because last year IMS had suggested that the cutoff would go around 42, but approximately 43, 44 के आसपास गया था. So again, whatever scores, whatever cutoffs is given, take it with a pinch of salt. एक दो marks ऊपर नीचे definitely हो सकता है. And anything else? BCA cutoffs 38, 39. See, difficulty level for the next paper, there is no way to predict. There's no way to find out कि next paper easy होगा, difficult होगा, क्या होगा. So I won't really comment on that. My only analysis or my only suggestions would be that whatever are your strengths, make sure that उसको अच्छे से कर रहे हो. Second, give at least 2 to 3 marks between this attempt and the next attempt. And आपके time management पे काम करो, because a lot of people who I spoke to were like either it was very easy or it was very difficult, because सर एक question पकड़ा गलत हो गया, but मतलब बहुत time दे दिया उस पे. So don't do that. Choose the questions smartly, choose the questions correctly, and everything should be fine. So that should be more or less it. I think I've covered everything, and I want to wish all the best to everyone for the second attempt. I'll see you all again on the 11th at 2 p.m. with the analysis of the next paper as well. So yeah, with that, signing off. Thank you so much, and all the best to everyone.